How's it going, guys? Crypto Bud here for today, and today's episode is going to be a really great, interesting discussion about the Bitcoin drama that's unfolding right now as we get closer to the August 1st date. And so in this video, I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin Cash and regular Bitcoin. So if you heard on those news, like what is that? I'm going to go ahead and break it down line by line. I'm also going to talk about the trading strategy that you want to have, and also a little bit about the things that I'm kind of doing behind the scenes to take advantage of this opportunity and protect myself in the event that something drastic happens. So stay tuned and stay in here, and I hope you guys watch it all the way. All right, so the first thing is we have a huge Bitcoin debate going on right now. Philosophically speaking, technically speaking, and also philosophically speaking about what is going to happen with Bitcoin come August 1st. And this is huge, guys, because number one, as you guys already know, Bitcoin dominates the cryptocurrency with about a 48% market cap. So these guys, so whatever happens to Bitcoin, it's going to take everything with it. And it's going to change the dynamic of the entire crypto space come August 1st and going forward. Now, again, you may disagree with me because some people say, well, Bitcoin's just going to be whatever it's going to do. But yes, there is. But there's this new little kink to that, and that's going to be Bitcoin Cash. So let's talk about what Bitcoin is first. Bitcoin is, as you guys well know, the gold standard for cryptocurrencies. Anytime you look at Bitcoin, you pretty much are going to be looking at the heart of crypto. And Bitcoin right now has a what I call a 1 megabyte block size, which means that all transactions are limited to a 1 megabyte. Originally, when it was first founded, 1 megabyte seemed like it was enough. But now, as you guys well know, as Bitcoin grew in popularity, now it's becoming a problem. And so what's happening here is that the issue of both scalability and also speed are really a result of this 1 megabyte limitation. So right now, if you go ahead and transact Bitcoin across from one person to another, it takes forever to get in there in terms of cryptocurrency speed. And not only that, the fees are outrageous. So what people are complaining about is what are some solutions to that? Right now, the solution to this problem is to employ what's called SegWit, and 95% of the miners and everybody in the developing team support it, so it's pretty much a done deal. The other thing they're trying to do is also increase what's called the block size from 1 megabyte to 2 megabyte by November, so eventually that's going to be another upgrade that they're going to do. And then eventually they're going to double that to 4 megabytes by 2018. So that's their solution for that for Bitcoin. Bitcoin right now only operates 3 transactions per second, which is very, very slow compared to Visa, MasterCard transactions, also like Ripple and Dash and Litecoin. So it's the original first mover advantage, and this is a critical juncture for Bitcoin because if Bitcoin does not pick up its game, it's going to become irrelevant in the next couple of years as other coins begin to catch up, technologically speaking, and become adopted. Bitcoin may just become that first mover advantage that never really changed or evolved. And then what we'll have is coin dominance falling. Okay, so that's our current situation with Bitcoin. So if you own Bitcoin, you basically own that. Now let's move on to our new one, which is called Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin ABC. This one is actually being proposed by a very small group of miners and a very small group of individuals, I'd say as well, that say, you know what, this whole SegWit thing ain't gonna work. Instead, we're gonna want to increase it to 8 megabytes, and we're gonna remove SegWit, and the result is going to be lower fees, more coins, because we're going to be mining more blocks. And we're going to implement this thing called replay and wet bot protection just to protect the people who are going to be on this coin and this fork. Now, let me tell you right now, these are going to be 2 identical coins. The only difference is that one of them is going to be operating under a different technology, while the other one is going to be there as well. So people are going to receive both coins if you own Bitcoin, since they're basically identical copies of that blockchain. The other thing is that Bitcoin Cash is going to have the ability to adjust difficulty depending on the hash rates and how many of the miners actually jump onto Bitcoin Cash. So they can pretty much make it really easy or harder depending on, you know, who jumps in for Bitcoin Cash. So there's a little bit of flexibility just because it would be, like I said, a new coin that would have their own features, kind of like Ethereum Classic. All right, so let's talk about who's against it and who's for it. So the people who are against it are going to be the main developers. There's 2 camps of this, the developers and the miners. And the developers are really against it because, first of all, they feel that if you increase the block size to 8 megabytes, as some of the miners are proposing, what you end up having is you have to increase the transaction processing power, which would limit the individuals from coming in and mining Bitcoin and processing these transactions, because at that point, what would happen is that they would need a lot more money to start up the hardware process, the upgrades. And so what would result is you would have a very small number of miners controlling a very large chunk of the blockchain. And so it would come into question this whole idea of decentralization for Bitcoin. The original paper written by Satoshi was that you pretty much needed a decentralized currency with no centralized government or institution controlling those coins. And by automatically doing this, you're in a way indirectly allowing a small group of individuals to control the fate of Bitcoin and whatnot. So philosophically speaking, that's really one of the main reasons. And I'm sure on the technical side, they're a little bit hesitant about going to 8 megabyte blocks as well. So without going into the technicals on that, I'm sure some computer programmer can maybe comment or explain that a little bit further. I have a feeling that they are moving it slowly for a reason, thinking that maybe the transactions may cause a clog in the system. So the action was to implement SegWit. So the developers say, you know what, we're not going to increase the block size immediately. We're going to increase it by a little bit by November, but our main focus should be SegWit. And SegWit's it's called segregated witness, which basically means that they're going to remove a piece of that in the blockchain so that it doesn't have to run that piece of it, and it'll actually, the transaction will go a little faster. Now, SegWit has been common and it's commonly found in some of the other coins like Litecoin and Dash and whatnot, and a lot of the coins, that's basically like the go-to to get to speed up transaction costs. The counter is that for Bitcoin is some of the small miners is that they're saying that Bitcoin expanding way too fast and that SegWit is not enough to fix the problem. In fact, they say that SegWit is just a band-aid to the core problem, which is actually the megabyte block size. So that's where we're at right now, and that's why philosophically they don't agree with it, although they do like SegWit. The problem is they don't like it the way it's being run right now, and I'm sure they would be for SegWit, but I think it's a megabyte block. So the miners are really kind of saying, you know what, we're not going to even bother with SegWit. So now the compromise by the developers were, and also the developers were saying, okay, you know what, we're not going to increase the block size to 8, but instead we're going to scale it from 2 megabytes and 4 megabytes by 2018. And the miners were still not happy with that. So let's move on to the saga. All right, so the next part, the unexpected happened. So all of this kind of goes back to this whole idea of BIP 91, which was when SegWit was voted on and it was locked in and everything happened. Everybody was happy. You know, Bitcoin ran up. We had, you know, Bitcoin 3000, that type of thing. But then, you know, these group of miners said, you know what, if SegWit doesn't happen or it doesn't happen, we're going to do BIP 148 proposal, which is kind of like a contingency plan in case BIP 91 said didn't go through. But then what had happened was BIP 91 passed, and then they said, well, you know what, that contingency plan, we're going to activate it because we actually want the bigger block size. So kind of, oh well, too bad. So now they said sorry, and so now we're going to be forking. So it caught everybody by surprise because we thought that the fork wasn't going to happen. And so the rally you saw in Bitcoin a couple of days ago was because people were cheering on that now we had a unified Bitcoin, but now these miners are creating another Bitcoin cache, which is going to fork, and then now BIP 148 is going to get run. So we are basically kind of like in this like yes and no, and that was the unexpected part. And part of the reason why you don't see a lot of action right now in the market is because people are just right now, they don't know what's actually going to happen. And when you have uncertainty like this, people don't want to move Bitcoin in and out, especially when you've got a fork coming in on one of your largest cryptocurrencies out there. I don't think this is actually a historical move in my opinion. Now, here's where it gets interesting, right? So now the question is, if Bitcoin Cash is online operation, which I think it will, what can you do with that, right? And so right now there's a couple exchanges that are against Bitcoin Cash. They're not going to support it. They're not going to award it, at least right now. They could change their minds later. And it's going to be Coinbase, Itbit, BitMEX, Bitstamp, and Poloniex, which is undecided. That's Polo, right? On the supporting side, not surprising, a lot of the Asian exchanges, OKCoin, Hoboi, Livecoin, BTC, Bithumb, and via BTC, which is one of the miners that has their own exchange. So as you can see, it's really about like East and West in a way. The Asian countries, which obviously have a large stake in it because that's where all the mining operations are at, are in support of that, while the other ones are against it. Now, this is probably not going to work. At some point, someone's going to have to come over the other side because if you're a Asian customer and you're operating on BCC, Bitcoin Cash, you can't go to the, I mean, this just kind of ruins the whole idea of decentralization. Now what you're doing is creating two camps, one camp with Bitcoin, the other camp with Bitcoin Cash. And I don't know if OKCoin is probably going to allow you to transfer Bitcoin, but we're going to be restricted on this side. So this is a mess. It's going to be like an even split. And actually, the community is really split midway too. 50% want Bitcoin Cash and 50% want Bitcoin. So I don't know what's going to be the tipping point, but it's going to be interesting to see. All right, this is where it gets a little interesting because originally when Bitcoin Cash first was proposed, and it was actually in development for a year, guys, by the way. This is nothing new. They've had it in development for a year already. So I'm not surprised that they decided to go along with the fork. The hash power in Bitcoin really is controlled by, if you take a look at it, by all these little tiny little miners, Bitfury, Bitcoin, Slushpool, like 3% or whatnot. But you got like some big players in there: Antpool, BTC Top, BTC.com, BTCC Pool, and the biggest one is going to be Antpool. Now, again, if Bitcoin Cash goes online, the ones that are able to survive are going to be the larger ones because not only do they have the funds, but they got the resources. They're going to pretty much dictate it. So really, the ones that have actually proposed for Bitcoin Cash are Bitcoin.com, which constitutes a 3.2%, so nothing negligible. It's really like nothing. Via BTC, which is another rogue one, which is right here at 5%. So if you add them up, that's about 8%. And an Antpool, okay, so here's the thing. You might say, wait a minute, Bitcoin Cash, that's just an afterthought. These little tiny miners, which have 8%, what are they going to do, right? What are they going to do? Well, here's a new development, and this is where it gets a little interesting because if you kind of put the pieces together a little bit, the fact that the exchange is already going to be offering BCC, and by the way, it's trading on the futures market for about 300 to 400 bucks right now. It kind of questions you a little bit about some of the other miners who are keeping a little quiet, with the exception of this guy right here, Bitmain, which operates the Antpool share, which controls 20% of the pie here. He pretty much stated that he was for SegWit 2x on the New York agreement. But he also mentioned that the New York agreement is not binding him to SegWit 2. So pretty much, if you kind of read between the lines, he's saying that although he is not against Bitcoin Cash, he's pretty much saying that he's not binded to SegWit and SegWit 2x. So he may offer both or may switch to Bitcoin Cash in the future. Now, again, the implications of this are huge because if you add up the percentages, although just with these three right here, if Antpool joins in the bandwagon and you've got some of the other guys in there and decide to go into this other chain, there's a very good possibility that the other ones will follow suit. So although right now everybody's going for SegWit and there's only two mining pools specifically that are for it, there's no guarantee that Bitcoin Cash is going to go down to zero because, again, if you're an exchange, why would you offer that? So again, kind of a little inside information, a little reading between the lines. Now, with that said, is this pie going to change? Most likely, because if Bitcoin Cash goes online, okay, and everybody moves towards it, some of these miners may not exist. So again, there's a very strong financial incentive for the miners to fork and to jump over to the other chain and abandon SegWit. Now, again, that's a big if, but just think about that for a second. Okay. All right. So what are the implications of this? Because as a trader investor, your primary goal is to preserve your own capital and your own portfolio, obviously. You need to think about what the implications are for the Bitcoin altcoin. So what I'm talking about that is, number one, is there probably is not going to be one altcoin Bitcoin fork, but there could be multiple ones. And people haven't really considered that idea that you can probably fork like 3 or 4 different ways. So we may see 4 or 5 Bitcoins, and they all could be Bitcoin, ABC, Bitcoin, something and Bitcoin this, and that can create a lot of confusion, and which will eventually cause a lot of problems to the Bitcoin ecosystem. I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. Who knows? It could be a good thing because now you can maybe use Bitcoin to buy a stick of gum or a cup of coffee. Who knows? And maybe some of the other coins are just going to die off. So altcoins is going to be something interesting to take a look at and trying to shift through that, specifically which ones are the good ones, which are the bad ones. Right now we just have Bitcoin Cash. That's what they're talking about, and hopefully that's the only one, but there's no guarantee that there won't be any other ones that they fork out. You're going to see Bitcoin price volatility huge because people are going to try to price this in. So is Bitcoin worth 3,000? Is it worth 5,000 when you got like 4 or 5 clones underneath it? Are you going to, everybody's going to buy Bitcoin and they're going to get rid of the altcoins completely? That valuation is going to really depend on people. And right now people are very emotional on the type of coin that they're for. Some people are for Bitcoin Cash. Some people are 100% on Bitcoin Core, and they can't agree. And so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to take a look at in terms of where exactly you need to kind of put your money in. The other thing is altcoin price volatility is going to be huge. Everything is traded under Bitcoin Core right now. However, if things change later on, then you might find that they may move over to Bitcoin Cash. Who knows? I don't know how the exchanges are going to run that. So that's going to affect the price of obviously these altcoins as people rotate in from Bitcoin, especially if the prices drop for Bitcoin. And Bitcoin Cash price rises, maybe people are going to hoard Bitcoin Cash and dump Bitcoin. I mean, there's that possibility. Or the other possibility is that everything is the same as before and nothing changes, and Bitcoin Cash goes to zero, and then the altcoins rise. So there's a lot of different scenarios for this one, but I can assure you one thing right now is that there's going to be a lot of price movement after August 1st, especially with the confusion about which one is the legitimate Bitcoin. The other one is you're going to have Bitcoin clone price consolidation. What I mean by that is that all the Bitcoin clones that, like, for example, Dogecoin, Litecoin, all of those, you could start seeing some movement around those because now they're going to start competing with the new Bitcoin forks, and they could be inferior or they could be superior to the new Bitcoin Cash. Who knows, right? So now what you're going to see is competition between a bunch of Bitcoin altcoins and the Bitcoin cloned altcoins going at it, saying, "Hey, I'm better than Bitcoin." No, but I'm necessarily better than this Bitcoin than this one or this one. So there's going to be a little bit of movement on that. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see what's actually going to happen. The other point I can actually think about is the rise of a new, better Bitcoin, which I think that's ultimately what everyone wants. Nobody wants this very slow transacting Bitcoin that's creating a lot of problems. Everybody wants something that is going to be better than the one before. So I think we may end up seeing something better after all this thing settle down. All right, so what should you guys do? Number one, you should move all your Bitcoin out of the exchanges unless the exchange has specifically stated that they will honor the fork. And what that means is that they're going to give you your Bitcoin Cash, whatever that fork is, because you're entitled for that because you're supposed to own the private keys. However, some of them are not doing that. So if you're not, get them off the exchanges, put them in your wallets. And as long as you own the private keys, you should be fine. Once the Bitcoin fork happens, what you're going to end up having is you basically doubled your money in a way. So if you had $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, now you're going to have $1,000, well, not worth, but you're going to have the equivalent amount of coins in Bitcoin Cash. And that may be higher or lower. Most likely will probably be lower as people are selling their coins. But think of it as an ICO. You just got a bunch of coins because somebody decided to fork, kind of like what we have with Ethereum Classic or Ethereum. The question is, can you sell them in the open market? And that's going to be an interesting point. So moving on to our last point here, can you redeem your BCC tokens in the open market and make some extra cash? And the answer is yes, you can if there's a market for it. But remember that everybody's going to be the exact same thing. So if everybody's going to be dumping their BCC tokens in the open market, then at that point it's a moot point. But at the minimum, you got some extra BCC tokens that maybe you can use later on. You should be safe regarding everything that I just said if you keep them on your own private key wallet. And I think there's a couple of steps you probably have to take to redeem your tokens. But aside from that, it should be fairly stable. The question you want to ask is this going to put a damper on Bitcoin's price overall? So that's the $1 million question, right? is Bitcoin going to go to 10,000? Is Bitcoin going to go to a million because of this fork? My personal guess is that because now you're going to have competing coins, it's going to put a cap on the price appreciation for Bitcoin. So Bitcoin right now has a pure monopoly on this thing. And because of the competition now, I think that ship may have sailed. However, if there's another unexpected turn of events where Bitcoin somehow becomes very, very valuable, somehow, then maybe we can. But this doesn't really bode well for a large price appreciation for Bitcoin. However, what it does bode well for is relevance and perhaps mainstreaming Bitcoin in some respect, because now you can actually use it in some way versus just using it for a store of value. Okay. All right, guys. Well, that's my own personal take on it. The way I'm playing this is I am kind of neutral on the whole thing. But I rather get something, a little token here and there, even though it could be a junk altcoin, but it's something that maybe I could use later. Hopefully these exchanges on the west side decide to implement BCC, because again, you don't want to, I don't know what to say. I don't want to start a whole philosophical political discussion on the practicality of having BCC, but I think that BCC has some merits in it, and I don't know if honestly SegWit is the way to go too. But that's just my personal take. All right, guys. Well, it's Crypto Bud here for this review, and hopefully you guys educate yourself and play it safe. Crypto Bud out.